It's been 3 months, but we finally are able to talk about an upcoming Portland Timbers match. The last time we could have said that, we were looking ahead to a game against the New England Revolution on the road, a game that, of course, never happened. But MLS is back with an aptly named tournament. MLS is back. That's what they're calling the tournament in Orlando, Florida. It'll start next month on July 8th. And today we found out who the Timbers will be playing in the group stage, at least. I'm Jake Zivin with my broadcast partners, Nat Borchers and Ross Smith. And before, guys, we talk about the group, let's give a quick, brief overview of what this tournament format is. It's kind of World Cup style for the MLS coming back. There's going to be 6 groups, 3 from each conference that are going to play a group stage. Each team will play 3 games in that group stage, and then 16 teams will advance out of that group stage for a knockout round, round of 16, quarterfinals, semifinals, and a final. The winner will all get one of the MLS spots to the CONCACAF Champions League for next year. They'll also get a $1.1 million purse, so there's some financial incentive. And the 3 group stage games will come towards the regular season, which the plan is, it sounds like, to resume that after this Orlando tournament. So, guys, we know who the Timbers are going to play. They're in a group in the Western Conference with the LA Galaxy, LAFC, and Houston Dynamo. That group was just revealed along with all the groups on Thursday afternoon. First impressions of this group, it's tough, especially with the 2 LA teams in it, right?
Well, if we talk along the lines of a World Cup format, I think you got to talk about a group of death. And could the group of F be the group of death? I think when we saw the talent start to get listed out, and the LA Galaxy, LAFC. And I think as part of a neutral, you want to see the Portland Timbers in there. You want to see them going up against what are the big names. But big names, do they have a punch still? I think LAFC, we're expecting that. LA Galaxy, not so sure. Chicharito, new striker, brought in. First 2 games for LA Galaxy, they weren't strong. Houston Dynamo, a revamped team under Tab Ramos. What are they going to be looking like? So I think you've got the certainty of LAFC, the uncertainty of the Galaxy, the Houston Dynamo. But I think people will be looking at circling the group of F as having potentially grade A talent.
Timbers, you've had the break now. You're thinking about, okay, what went right, what went wrong in those first 2 games. It's really an opportunity to kind of reset right now. And, I think all teams are looking at just like really fresh start, because really you haven't, if you've gone 0-2 so far in MLS, it doesn't really matter because you kind of get this fresh start now. And you look at it, I think that this is a very tough group. I think Houston Dynamo with Tab Ramos are trying to, really figure out what kind of team they are, find the identity. When you have a new coach coming in, you still have to figure things out. You could see the first couple games that they played against LA Galaxy and at Sporting Kansas City, they struggled. They really couldn't figure out, how they wanted to play. They had good stretches here and there, but nothing that they really liked that was consistent. And it showed in the results. Both LA Galaxy and Houston are winless in their first 2 games. But you have to look at LAFC to be the team to beat, if you're looking from the Timbers standpoint, because they're obviously had such a great year last year. And under Bob Bradley, they've had that, fun identity to watch. And I think it's really going to be a mouth-watering matchup to watch those games against LAFC, LA Galaxy, and of course, when you play against Houston, you're going to have old friends like Zarek Valentine to play against.
Yeah. Zarek Valentine Derby is what it'll be. But these are big matches. LA Galaxy, Portland, LAFC, Portland. I mean, those games are going to get kind of nationally hyped, as they always do when they're in the regular season, except they're going to be played in Orlando in front of no fans. You guys played the game, but nobody has played in this situation. I mean, this is unprecedented where we're at worldwide. How, as players, would you prepare for a tournament, a situation like this?
I think it's certainly helped on by, number one, the points are going to matter toward the season. I think that was the big question coming in is to that. What gets a player motivated to go all the way to Orlando to get going again, outside of just their innate joy for the game? You have to have something on the line. And so you've got the games that matter towards the competition. And you mentioned it, Jake, the purse, $1.1 million for the prize. You get the CONCACAF Champions League spot as well. But I think it comes down, the 2 real gems are the points towards the season. But the person, who's to say how that gets split up? Is it evenly across players? Is it players? Is it is it dollar amount per minute played? But that's, I think, a significant amount for some players, and so that's meaningful. And then Nat, I'll lean to you here, but in terms of the times of games and the motivation for it, I've kind of gone back and forth with it. I think number one, you're playing when it's going to be the coolest, so the weather when the 9 o'clock starts Eastern time in the morning, then the night time. So I think that will certainly help. But in terms of getting up in the morning, I think, well, do you want that as a player? So for that, now I wonder with the timings of the games, and also to do with players being in and around it without a crowd, that motivation as well. What's the mental approach?
Quickly, to just follow up, Ross, on what you're referring to, we know what time the games will be played at. They're going to be played at 9 a.m. Eastern time, again, in Orlando, so 6 a.m. Pacific time, at 8 p.m. Eastern time, and at 10:30 Eastern time, pretty much every day throughout this group stage. It's going to be hot in Orlando, right? It always is. So they're doing that in the morning to avoid the heat and at night to avoid the heat, but not kind of maybe traditional times for a game, except for that 8 p.m. Eastern time start. Yeah, how do you deal with that now?
Well, I mean, what I do like about this tournament and the format overall is that it does create a sense of urgency, right? You're going to have fewer games to play in a shorter time period, tournament style. And that means you have to come out, on fire. You look at a typical MLS season, you can have stretches where you play poorly and still get into the playoffs. You can struggle throughout situations and just be, okay. And then all of a sudden you catch fire, you win 5 or 6 games and you're in. In this situation, if you play 2 bad games, you could be out. 1 bad game, 1 bad performance means you could be out. And so I love that about the format. I love that it's really going to light a fire under everybody in terms of, the sense of urgency. Like, we got to come out, we got to play. We can't wait. There's no tomorrow with this. So I think that part of it's great. I love the purse as well, Ross. You mentioned it. I don't know how that's going to be split up, but if you're talking about 30 players or so with $1 million purse, you're talking about at least 30 grand a player. And that's big. Those are the kind of bonuses that it takes entire seasons to get to. You're getting it in a situation where you play 6, 7 games. You've got that, and it's, I think that's big time. But in terms of the preparation as a player, I wonder from the player standpoint how conservative they're going to be in some of these games because they haven't trained in so long. So you have a situation where they've been off for a while. They've been doing individual training sessions, but it hasn't been the kind of situation where you can really test your body. So these next, I think, month in preparation, 3 weeks of preparation, crucial for these teams because they have to get the bodies right. They have to get them battle tested, but they can't push too hard. They can't push too soft. They have to go and get it to a point, the bodies to a point where they're ready. And I think mentally and physically, it's going to be very difficult. But I think for the player standpoint, it seems like everybody's ready to go. A lot of time off, a lot of uncertainty throughout this. You had the CBA situation, which was very hectic and stressful for a lot of players. So I think they're ready. Now it's just about, the coaches and the training staff getting the bodies ready to play.
Just off that, Jake, real quick, I'll be interested in it. I know players mentally will be ready now, but have they prepared themselves in the right way during this time so that they can hit the ground running? And I bet there would have been a lot of managers holding their breath when they saw their players for the first time since coming back from the pandemic and individual training to group training. Look, Nat, some guys they would have enjoyed their time off in terms of not doing their fitness, not doing the runs. And
that's why I was laughing.
You can talk about. Oh, you could. And this is across the league. You can talk about players getting their assignments and training sessions that they need to do. Let's be honest. I'd be so. There was one club in this league where every single player did exactly what the manager asked them to do. So I think what we're going to be seeing in the first games, we're going to be looking at fitness levels. So the manager, can only do so much with players if they're not fit. And so how are the players with coming back through the doors from day one? And how does the manager utilize that time to make sure injuries aren't happening, to make sure they're getting everybody on the same page? This has never happened before for a manager. You think of preseason, manager knows when day one will be, they know how many weeks they have. But for players during this time, there's some who were keeping themselves fit, I imagine, and then they had no idea when they were going to return. So they dipped and then probably last second realized, okay, the tournament's going to be coming. I got to get going again. you just don't have, as a manager, players starting at the same starting line and knowing that what certain amount of time you have. Never seen it before. Probably one of the toughest situations a manager could be in.
And it's got to be so tough as a player these past few months because you don't know. There was no finish line, right? Even in a regular offseason, you know when you have to report. Even if your offseason starts November 1st, well, you know you're going to have to report on January 20th or whatever it is. And you can use your offseason to recover and relax in the beginning and then get yourself back to where fitness needs to be. Not everybody does that, obviously, right? At least you know when you have to be ready. But for the past 3 months, until maybe a week or two ago, nobody knew when they had to be ready. And now, of course, they do. Let's go through the groups really quick. I want to get your guys' overall thoughts on maybe what groups intrigue you. 3 from the East, 3 from the West. One of the teams in the East has 6. One of the groups in the East has 6 teams. All the others have 4. Nashville, for the purposes of this tournament and for the purposes of any regular season competition after this tournament, is going to move to the Eastern Conference. Makes sense geographically. So there's 14 teams in the East, 12 in the West. We'll start with Group A. That's Orlando City. They're the host since it's in Orlando. Inter Miami is in that group. We found that out before the draw, which was interesting, but that'll be the first match of the tournament, and that makes sense. It's the first rivalry match between the 2 Florida teams. In that group, they also get New York City FC, Philadelphia Union, Chicago Fire, and Nashville. That's Group A. Group B is a Western Conference group. Seattle Sounders, FC Dallas, Vancouver, San Jose Earthquakes. Group C, an Eastern Conference group. Toronto FC, New England Revolution, Montreal Impact, DC United. Group D, a Western Conference group. Real Salt Lake, Sporting Kansas City, Colorado Rapids, Minnesota United. And Group E, the last group from the East, Atlanta United, FC Cincinnati, New York Red Bulls, and the Columbus Crew. Then, of course, there's Group F with the Timbers, LA Galaxy, LAFC, and the Houston Dynamo. Not Group F, so not the Timbers group. Which of those other 5 groups intrigues you guys the most? Which do you think is the toughest group with the best matchups?
I think Group E. You got to look at Atlanta United's coming up against a revamped Columbus Crew. Caleb Porter has gone out, and he's made a couple of big signings. Darlington Nagbe returns with Caleb Porter. And the first 2 games of the year, Columbus Crew, they look solid. New York Red Bulls with this style of play, that pressing style that Chris Armas has implemented or just transitioned from Jesse Marsh and continues to do a good job. Atlanta United, obviously with the talent, Joseph Martinez, I think we're going to be finding out more and more how far along he is with his recovery from his ACL injury that he sustained against Nashville. But, don't expect him to be close, but they still have tons of talent. But then FC Cincinnati with their newly named manager, Yap Stam. He's a center back that I used to follow in his days at Manchester United. No-nonsense guy. You feel at all times when FC Cincinnati were, you could argue, the laughing stock of the league, they've come in with a manager who is a no-nonsense guy, good reputation, and you expect him to turn things around. So I think what you see from that is there's no gimmies, and people could say Cincinnati, easy 3 points. You don't know with a new manager. Every single match in Group E for me is going to be difficult.
Are we only talking about Eastern Conference right now?
Just any of the groups, your pick.
I mean, the group that I think is going to be the toughest, in my opinion, is Group D. I look at Real Salt Lake, Kansas City, Colorado Rapids, Minnesota United. The parity there was pretty high. You look at how well Sporting Kansas City started off this year. Vermees just was able to breathe new life into these guys. The way they were getting results, the way they were moving the ball. The new signings they've had, I just feel like they look to me like the team to beat from West, to start this year. You look at Real Salt Lake, Freddie Juarez, I like what he's done with that team in terms of keeping things very, very simple. Kyle Beckerman was out earlier this year. I think he's going to be back, from an injury. I think that'll help them a lot. You look at the Colorado Rapids, Robin Frazier.
Don't you?
I may text him here and there. Obviously you have the Colorado Rapids, who also you say have played very, very well to begin the year, and to end last year. Robin Frazier has done a great job, I think, tactically with that group. And then we saw Minnesota United, with what they did, when they came to Providence Park earlier this year. They had a great game against the Timbers. They just beat them with speed, with counterattacking. I think they could absolutely fly up and down the field. So that's a group, obviously other than Group F, that I'm going to be, looking at in terms of, some of those matchups. And then you have the rivalry too. Real Salt Lake, Kansas City, those teams don't like each other. Salt Lake Rapids, those teams, obviously don't like each other. And, I think nobody from that group likes Sporting Kansas City. So there you go.
I mean, to me, that's the group of death. I think it doesn't stand out on paper like maybe Group F does because of the bigger names of LA Galaxy, LAFC, Portland Timbers. I mean, those are three of the kind of big clubs in MLS that get the national TV focus, the maximum amount of times every season. But there's 4 teams in MLS that won their first 2 games this year before the season was paused. 3 of them are in the West, and they're all in that group: Kansas City, Minnesota, and Colorado. It's only 2 games. It's a small sample size, but those 3 teams started up the season quite well. And you mentioned Kansas City. They were flying. Minnesota was flying. I mean, we saw what they did at Providence Park, and then they went to San Jose, and they smashed them in week 2. Mm-hmm. But it's such a long layoff. It's going to be 4 months in between games. And I think, as you guys had talked about, we're going to really have to see what teams are like, what they've been doing, and feel them out. It's a lot of unknowns coming into this tournament. I want to talk about a couple things. One big thing, competition-wise, that's going to come into play in this tournament that we're seeing in the Bundesliga, we're seeing in all the leagues that are restarting in Europe, and that's a couple changes to the competition rules, notably substitutions. Teams are going to be allowed 5 substitutions during this tournament. They can only stop the game for those substitutions 3 times. So you're not going to have a case where a team has like 4 subs left going into stoppage time. They have a 1-goal lead and they just sub every 2 minutes. But you can sub at halftime, and that won't count towards one of those stoppages. And they can have a bigger bench. I think 23 players on the bench. How does that change a team's approach, one, to each individual game, where now you can have 5 substitutions and a bigger bench to pull from, and also as you go through a tournament setting where we don't know yet the schedule of the games, but we do know that it's going to be a little compact. It's not going to be Saturday, right? There's going to be, maybe four days or so in between games. How do these new rules play? How do you see them playing into this tournament?
I think it can help the star players more to make sure you're getting them on the pitch for every single game, and you're getting good minutes out of them. So where you have the 5 substitutions that, say, for instance, Sebastian Blanco has run himself into the ground game 1. Game 2, the manager's thinking, well, his legs are a little bit heavy, but I want to give him a go. You know that you have 5 substitutions, and you want Sebastian Blanco on the pitch. So I'll take the angle from, I think, for the stars and making sure you're getting them in the games for whatever significant minutes and important minutes they can offer. That's valuable, because then you don't necessarily have to worry about if the 50th minute they blow up and you need to bring somebody else on. It's not going to hurt you as bad with having that many substitutes.
You look at that from a coaching standpoint as well. I think it adds a layer of intrigue for a coach, because for the coaches that do like to sub a lot. If you're looking at a game and saying, hey, look, it's the latter stage of the game. We're not playing well. You can make a lot more adjustments to your team tactically, I think, and really give yourself a good chance to make a change. And so I think, gosh, from a coaching standpoint, there's going to be players too who are sitting there like, hey, you made 3 subs. You still have 2 more subs to make. Why am I not involved? And so I think it adds a layer of complexity. But overall, when you're thinking of the big picture too, you want to give guys minutes and meaningful minutes if you don't progress past any stages of this tournament. So I think it's going to be good to get those added players, some minutes that are meaningful when it comes into this tournament, and just getting them back towards, because obviously this is a smaller version of what the season is going to look like. So you get those minutes in, you still have the rest of the season, hopefully, to focus on.
It will be interesting to see some of the depth from all of these teams, and particularly the Timbers. Maybe see some players get some meaningful minutes that we haven't seen in the past. I want to wrap it up, guys. Overall, big picture for the Timbers. What do you want to see out of them in this tournament? And I should mention, to advance out of the group, you can finish top 2 in your group, and 4 of the 6 third-place teams will also advance. It's got to be, obviously, goal number 1 is to advance to that knockout stage. But what do you want to see? What do the Timbers need to do, I guess, to get there? And what are you hoping to see from them in July in Orlando?
Pulling together. I think what it comes down to is the time between now and when we see them on the pitch in Orlando. how they pull together. And that comes down to the manager. That comes down to the manager understanding the fitness levels, the capabilities physically from the players, and then the players understanding what the manager wants from them. So they might not be flying out of the gates. You might not see a Timbers to start the tournament, or any team for that matter, that you would normally see mid-season this time of year usually, when a team is hitting on all cylinders. So it's understanding that you may not be at your best individually, collectively, but understanding collectively that you're on the same page and how you can maneuver matches together. So the organization, the teamwork with it, I think will be so valuable.
Yeah, I want to see, that, to add on that, Ross, the sense of urgency from the group, just to understand that, we know we're not in, mid-season form, postseason form. It's still early, but we have, that sense of urgency and that fight. I think you have those things, you have to get results. So coming out, swinging, making sure that you understand that, this means something, that, you're fighting for something that's real, that's valuable. And then there's that organizational component, Ross, you touched on, just, wanting to see, where things stack up in the midfield, in the back line, where the Timbers want to press. It's going to change, though, from game to game, opponent to opponent. But just seeing, some consistency along the first 3 games in terms of what that looks like, because I know Gio talked a lot about that early on in these first 2 games, about just getting that balance right. And so I think that's going to be really important for the group. And then that kind of sets the stage for hopefully the tournament and then the rest of the season.
MLS is back. The tournament will start on July 8th in Orlando. The Timbers in Group F, LAFC, LA Galaxy, and the Houston Dynamo. Guys, it's great to actually be able to talk about an upcoming soccer game with you guys. It's been 3 months since we've been able to do so. Feels good. Look forward to watching the Timbers in about a month when they start their time in Orlando. The schedule will come out in the upcoming days. Nat, Ross, good to catch up. Good to chat.
You as well, buddy.
Thanks, bud.